这里是解说君的频道。今天我们和木头姐带你一起探索科技、经济和政治的最前沿话题。首先是 Deepseek， 这个科技巨头的崛起究竟是偶然，还是预示着未来科技的一次大变革？木头姐将给你一个全新的视角，让你看到 Deepseek 如何重新定义人工智能的应用场景。接下来，特斯拉的全球战略再次引发了热议。随着全球能源转型的加速，特斯拉在未来如何继续引领市场变革？它又将在未来几年内面临怎样的挑战和机遇？再来说说川普 2.0， 特朗普的回归意味着什么？从政治角度来看，这一转变对全球经济格局将产生哪些深远的影响？我们将带你透析美国政治未来的走向，揭开川普复出的内幕。最后，我们不得不提的 AI， 人工智能技术在日新月异的演进中，它将如何在接下来的10年里彻底改变我们的生活？木头姐带来的 AI 深度解析，让你1秒钟把握住这个时代最重大的创新力量。从市场动向到科技创新，从政治风云到全球经济，今天木头姐的讨论将给你带来耳目一新的视角和独到的见解。准备好了吗？关注本频道，跟我们一起掌握最新动态。
I think what it's telling us is the cost of innovation is collapsing, which it has been doing. I mean, the cost of AI training is dropping before this, 75% per year. The cost for inference, 85 to 90%. I think it throws the weight more towards inference chips from training chips, and so NVIDIA is highly exalted, and deservedly so, in the training chip space. Inference is a lot more competitive.
Okay, do we fully understand the implications of that? Because the question that everybody's asking this morning is, do I buy the dip? So if we're seeing the landscape changing, is it too early to make that transition and understand what the implications of it are?
Yes, we've been studying the tech stack and where we think it's going. We're going to put out big ideas in, I think, a week.
Give us some hints.
Yes, so here's a hint. We do think there are share shifts taking place within the tech stack. We think platform as a service, so think Palantir, is going to gain significant share. And this news yesterday, I think, highlights that, reinforces that. We think infrastructure as a service is going to stabilize the share. Software as a service will come down a share. However, I've said all of that. All of them will be growing rapidly. It's just how rapid.
And Palantir, we should say, is one of your holdings, of course, a company you know very well, Cathie. So if inference is going to become cheaper, is this going to be a situation that drives more demand? We were talking about, is that where the positivity comes from? For the companies that don't train but do infer.
Yes.
How positive is this going to be?
It's going to be extremely positive. So those using AI, whether for productivity or other applications, are going to benefit. We think the two most profound use cases right now, besides increasing productivity for everyone, autonomous mobility, so think cars, drones, and so forth, and interestingly, the healthcare space. We think the convergence of various sequencing technologies, AI, and CRISPR gene editing, that convergence is going to cure more and more diseases over time.
So these sound like huge positives for the businesses that are involved in that stream. What does it tell us about US tech overall? We had a conversation yesterday about whether this is some kind of end of US exceptionalism, and that might be in terms of stocks broadly, but in terms of the US tech sector, are we talking about that? Or is this just the Sputnik moment that's been mentioned many times, a chance for the US now to catch up again?
Yes, I think competition is great for the US, and Deepseek is competition, no doubt about it. I'm hearing all of the titans, tech titans, speak of it glowingly. I don't think we know everything about it yet. So no, I think it's competition is good for the United States. Lowering costs is great for the world. The collapse in the cost of innovation should help all regions of the world. I will say that was more about margins. This is about innovation. So we're looking more closely at China now.
I want to pick up on China in just a moment, but I want to go back to that point you made about cost of innovation collapsing specifically. that would almost lead to the fact that perhaps it brings down the barriers of entry for mid-cap tech firms or maybe people away from the hyperscalers. But you haven't seen that second level outside of the AI adopters really catch the same bid in the way you see Amazon or Microsoft or even Oracle catch up a little bit. What's the hiccup there if, as you say, the cost of innovation is collapsing? Why aren't some of these stocks reflecting that?
Well, I think there's a big debate going on. And if you look at the second, third, and fourth quarter of last year, you look at the mega caps and the rest of the stocks in the S&P 500, you'll see mega caps in the second and the fourth did very well. And the smaller cap stocks did very well, much better than the mega caps in the third quarter. I think there's a little bit of a tug of war evolving here. And if we're right, the most massive concentration in the market in history, worse than the Depression, is probably going to give way to a broader based bull market. We're seeing that in our portfolios, and it really did start right around actually the day after the election. And I think one of the most important things is going to happen is regulations coming down. Even in AI, in the United States, their regulations started to intrude in a technology that is today where the internet was in the early 90s. We don't even know what we have yet. Yeah. We're as excited as back then, but now is not the time to regulate it heavily.
Well, I think you've got the president on your side when it comes to that in the States. I want to come back to kind of this idea of the hyperscalers here. You're famous for your beta strategy, especially when it comes to the tech space. I think it's fair to say that the highest beta right now is in some of these tech names, in NVIDIA, in Microsoft, in Google, just looking at some of the moves we've seen in the last 24 hours, not to mention the last 12 months or so. Why not increase your holdings for more exposure to the hyperscalers?
Yeah, we do think, we do own Meta and Amazon in our flagship, and we own more of them in our other more specialized portfolios. And in Europe here, we have an AI and robotics fund, and we hold probably most of them because they are going to benefit from the declining cost in AI. And even Meta, who was really the open source leader, Deepseek is open source. I think Meta is saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? And they're going to use some of the techniques, the algorithms that Deepseek has used to improve their own platform. So we're not negative on them. We think that the neglect of the rest of the market has been extreme, and that is going to change. That the strongest bull market out there is a broad-based one. A market favoring 6 or 7 stocks alone is not a strong bull market. And so if we're right, the bull market will strengthen out and gain momentum, rewarding smaller cap stocks than we have seen thus far.
You use Meta as a great example. Meta, before they went all in on AI, went all in on the metaverse, and there was a big pullback on some of that investment. Yes. Do you need to be sitting on billions or trillions of dollars in cash to excel in AI in the next 5 years?
Well, I think Deepseek just taught us that the answer is less than people thought. You don't need as much cash as we once thought. I don't know if the number is right, 6 million to train that model. That's unbelievable. It's a tenth or less. Now, many people don't believe that, but again, it fits in with the costs collapsing thesis. They were collapsing anyway. Deepseek has just stepped it up a notch.
Cathie, you mentioned earlier that you're increasingly looking at China. I'm interested in what that looks like, but also how much you think that the US tech companies are going to engage with this, or US businesses will engage with this new technology, Deepseek, coming as it does out of China, given everything we've heard about TikTok and where your data ends up. That might raise some flags for some people.
You know, it's very interesting. We've been thinking about President Trump, or many people have been thinking that, oh, wow, this is very negative for China and a U.S. Relationship with China. But there is another point in history that might be repeating to some extent here. It's called Nixon in China. Nixon did not trust China. He and everybody trusted Nixon because he did not trust China, and they knew he wouldn't lead us astray. I think the same thing is happening here with President Trump. And from a technology point of view, I think he likes the competition, and he actually did say, I believe yesterday, that, you know, this just shows that even in the U.S., regulations, especially that executive order on AI, which he rescinded, probably has held us back. And now, let's go.
Cathie, you talked a moment ago about the Great Depression and the concentration we saw going into the Great Depression and the number of single stocks. Do you think we get a smooth transition from that concentration to the broadening out of the market. That's not what the Great Depression taught us. It taught us that you get a collapse, and US consumer confidence and so many other things seem to be hinged on this stock market performance. Is it a smooth ride from concentration to diversification? How big a gap could there potentially be between one and the other?
Yes, if you look back at the Depression, I'm not going to get all of these numbers right. What you'll see is the massive concentration took place until 1932.
Yeah.
At which point the market started broadening out. And small or mid-cap stocks back then way outperformed large cap stocks. And it makes sense. They had been absolutely destroyed during the Depression, which was binary. Is this company going to survive or not? With output down 30%, GDP down 30%. It is surprising to me that we got to an even greater point of concentration than the Great Depression. It tells you that in an underlying sense, there was a lot of fear in the market and that investors were piling into cash-rich companies that, oh, by the way, had, a leg up perhaps in this new thing called AI. Now I think it's just going to broaden out.
We're looking at a Bitcoin handle of about 103,000. Cathie, I want to bring you into this conversation. You've been a crypto bull for a very long time.
Yes.
You've also, prior to the break, talked a lot about deregulation under Donald Trump in the tech sector, but then also in the crypto sector as well. What has fundamentally changed since he's taken office when it comes to deregulation?
I think we will get significant clarity in terms of regulation. We will get legislation as well. I think many more policymakers in Washington understand that this was a single vote issue for many voters, especially young voters. And so this is becoming much more of a bipartisan issue. And of course, you have the executive branch also supporting it mightily, proposing that we include Bitcoin in Treasury Reserve. So you've got, I think we're going to have support of all three branches of government are going to be supportive, which is a big change.
Well, it would be a big change. And I mean, are we really sure of that, I suppose, is the question, because Gary Gensler, the SEC, had a very different view of the risks and the retail investor protections that should be in place when it comes to crypto. There are surely a lot of people who still believe that's important.
Well, I think he didn't understand that this is the next big wave of the internet. This is the layer of the internet that developers did not build in the early 90s because no one thought anyone would buy or use financial services on the internet. I remember back then, no one was going to give their credit card to the internet, right? This is the next big wave, and it's a huge efficiency move for the financial services sector. So in terms of Bitcoin specifically, it is really the leader in a new asset class, and we have a paper out on that. You can see the low correlations which do define a new asset class, and it is a global monetary system. It's a very big idea. My professor, mentor, friend, Art Laffer, when he collaborated with us on our Bitcoin paper in 2015, he said, this is what I've been waiting for since the U.S. closed the gold window in 1971. So he has been energized by this new movement towards a rules-based global monetary system.
Do you think Trump's going to be on board with that? Like the president has indicated he's quite a big fan of the US dollar, and it sounds like what you're suggesting is a replacement for the US dollar.
No, we actually think that that these two will coexist, and if anything, what we're seeing with the stablecoin movement, which is how people, is the on-ramp into decentralized financial services. They're all backed by Treasury securities, which de facto they're backed by the dollar. So we think that movement is gaining momentum here, especially now with the deregulation.
You say they're rules-based, but then we see more coins coming all the time. So they might be restricted
from
to
the president.
Yeah, from the president and his wife. So
I said Bitcoin was rules-based. 21 million units, and we're nearly at 20 million now. So that scarcity value will continue to support Bitcoin going forward.
So you're talking about the stable coin kind of being backed by basically by the federal government. Why not just use the digital dollar and develop the digital dollar with that same appeal?
So I live in Florida, And the governor of Florida, Governor DeSantis, has said he will never allow a central bank digital currency to be used in Florida. I think Texas has said the same thing. This is a states' rights issue, and it's all about privacy. Many people here in Europe don't think we care about privacy. On this one, on this score, we care about privacy. And this president very much supports that point of view.
Well, you're talking then, wading back into the idea of regulation and cryptocurrency. Viewers also kind of chiming into this conversation. Cryptocurrency has rallied so much on that speculative ability and being unregulated. But if you're talking about these almost caveats to stable coins or caveats to Bitcoin or caveats to other tokens that may be traded, doesn't that kind of eliminate the fundamental appeal of what has moved it to 103,000?
So Bitcoin, I don't agree with that at all. I thought where you were going was all of these tokens being issued. We went through another period like this. It was 2017, and Bitcoin that year went from less than $1,000 to $20,000. That was the ICO boom, and most of those failed. So it's buyer beware. Yeah. Be careful, and that is why we need some regulation here, because it's out of control, as I think you would say. Bitcoin's a completely different animal, though. Completely different.
Isn't Bitcoin just a correlated asset to tech? That's the lesson from yesterday.
No, it isn't. Actually, it's part of the tech movement. The
correlation on the numbers looks pretty convincing.
It's part of the tech movement, but if you look at Bitcoin, it has served as both a risk-on asset, so that's tech, yes, but also a risk-off asset. When we went through the regional bank crisis in the U.S. in the spring of 23, Bitcoin took off. Why? Because there's no counterparty risk in Bitcoin. If Bitcoin
sells off, will crypto go down significantly?
The correlations are there is a correlation, but it is not as high as, small cap equities to large cap equities. The more institutions get involved, the more correlations will go up. But right now, if you look at the statistics, the correlations in terms of returns and risk among these assets, very different.
解说君备注：今天我们领略了木头姐 Cathie Wood 对市场的独到见解，从 Deepseek 的技术创新到特斯拉在新能源汽车领域的领导力，再到川普 2.0 的政治影响力，以及如何重新塑造个行业的未来。每一个领域都暗藏着巨大的变革潜力，可能彻底改变现有的经济生态。木头姐的投资视野和她对未来趋势的洞察，正为我们揭示了一个正在崛起的新时代。Deepseek 代表着数据和技术的深度整合，特斯拉则在能源革命中扮演着无可替代的角色，而川普 2.0 背后所代表的政治力量，可能将对全球格局产生长远的影响。而 AI 的出现已不仅仅是一个技术革新的话题，它还可能带来社会、就业甚至文化层面的巨大转变。未来将是那些能够站在科技最前沿，精准预见行业变革的人占据主导地位的时代。木头姐的思维深度与对未来的精准判断，提醒我们，投资不仅是资本的博弈，更是对未来趋势的战略布局。感谢大家收看今天的分享。如果你对未来的投资趋势感兴趣，别忘了订阅频道，跟我们一起深入探讨如何把握这些变革的机会。解说君想听听你们的声音，评论区见。